Per usual, everything on this channel is for educational purposes only. It's not intended as financial advice. It's been a while. It's been a month. It's been over a month. Let's take a look at some quick news and themes that's been going on lately. And if you don't know already, I'm with Valkyrie now. I'll leave the links to the videos and Twitters and all that fun stuff below. I do content for them weekly. Newsletter, video, check that out if you've missed me. So obviously we have the Ukraine situation, which is really helping illuminate to people that you don't need Bitcoin until you need Bitcoin specifically. And I say Bitcoin just because we're not really seeing stories of people using Ethereum on a USB drive to leave a country, but hey, that's possible too. The narrative for Bitcoin specifically has been extremely strong throughout all of this, and that certainly helped the normal people, the no-coiners, the crypto curious, understand the intrinsic value a little bit. What does decentralization actually mean? How does it actually play out? And for many people, this has been a life-saving endeavor, quite literally for them, as they're fleeing Ukraine. The second narrative for BTC lately has been Do Kwon and Terra buying a significant amount of BTC with reserves. We had a Ponzi coming out of 2019's ascending triangle. So why not have another Ponzi coming out of 2022's ascending triangle? Whether or not it's a Ponzi, I mean, we won't find out till it blows up, right? But I think for many people, they can certainly understand the classification of a Ponzi in that regard. So it's a little concerning that we're relying on one entity, a whale basically, to buy this all up. It feels great. Whales feel great on the way up. The problem is when we have these single collateral loans or single collateral backstops and something happens with a significant period of volatility and there's a need to sell the reserve for shoring up the USDT reserve, right? And again, you can read all about this. There's a massive summary on how this all works. So this part, the reserve pool, not necessarily a Ponzi as much as the UST stuff in general. But it's a very interesting system. Read more about it if you're curious. Ultimately, Terra's going to buy a bunch of BTC. Cool. And we know that. We can see it on chain. They've already bought. They said $1 billion. I've only seen evidence for like 500 million. So all that's happening. And, do I know about that ahead of time? No. Did I know Ukraine and Putin and rates were going to rise? Like, no, I don't care about any of that. Ultimately, if you're just looking at the historical seasonality analytics, did I know we were going to get an ascending triangle or an edge move in the cloud? No, I didn't. But going into Q2, historically, we've done remarkably well in that period of time, as well as Q4. And right now we are at 3% down on the quarter with a mean post 13 at flat, nothing, zero. So we're well within averages there. 50% on the quarter from here would bring us to what exactly? So 50% would bring us basically to an all-time high retest, which, hey, it's possible. I'm not going to rule that out. But I'm certainly leaning bullish. I don't know where exactly we go in Q2, but the fact that this is all lining up for Q2, we're past quad witching now, which was this futures and options rollover on Friday. We're leaning into these longer expiration contracts that aren't expiring soon. And you got to think if there's people willing to take bets one way or the other, they're waiting for a longer time horizon, most likely than worried about closing out contracts in the near term. So that certainly helps us, as well as just quarterly rollover, monthly rollover, blah, 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 right? Now, this is the single most important chart that I've been looking at really for all of crypto, because as goes Bitcoin, so goes crypto. Let's just be honest about that. Ethereum certainly done extremely well in the face of everything else that's going on. And I'll talk about that in a second. But as many of you already know, as many of you have been tagging me, which is great. I love it. You don't need me to say this to know what my position is going to be here, but we officially had an edge-to-edge trigger. Arguably, we've had one fake or false trigger because we didn't have this bullish decay cross. The second one we had a bullish decay cross that immediately retraced. Theoretically, you would have gotten stopped out. I chose to not even bother with that one because we were up so much on the day. We were up, 10% or something? I don't know, whatever it was. So I finally got in, 2 days ago? Wherever we finally closed in the cloud on a smallish candle. I said, okay, this is it. We were getting closer to filling in this ascending triangle. Now we're flirting with flipping bullish on the 200 moving average. And, you may or may not see a bunch of sentiment flip here. I'm not really sure. I'm hoping more people stay bearish, but I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. You can look at funding for that. If funding stays negative or flat, that's for the best. If futures premiums stay flat or in backwardation, that's for the best. You don't want people to get too excited too soon. If they do, then you see this big like rubber banding effect like you did here, right? This wasn't even that bad. This was pretty minor considering how this sort of catapulted up. But the idea of the trade setup is the same. You know, I've said this over and over and over again, not backpadding, just like, you know, you should know what I'm going to say, which is, yeah, this looks bullish. This looks like it wants to go to the other edge of the cloud, wherever that may be eventually. Now, alternatively, this may get held under the 200, get held at this 45K resistance and just sort of chop people up until April, right? I don't know. But this continues for me to lean more and more bullish. In order for this to lean bearish, it would have to break this diagonal support, break below the cloud, and break below this high volume area at, let's say, 39K. You know, if we're below all those things, then I get significantly more bearish. But it's very hard to me to get bearish in the near term, seeing us where we're at. Now, are we overbought to some degree, maybe on lower time frames because we've had 5 days of up? Sure, right? Is this parabolic? Sure, right? If I'm zoomed way in, that's what I'm focused on, but I'm not zoomed way in. This is what I'm focused on. I'm focused on Q2, sort of multi-month stuff. Now, if you measure the ascending triangle, you get a target of 51 to 55, which, sure, right? Awesome. This may take some time still to get there. I don't expect this to happen in one candle, certainly, but it's well within the expectations of Q2, April, May, June. You know, we'll know how bullish we are by May, most definitely. If we're cruising above 45K by May, 50K by May, whatever that is, above the yearly pivot, above the 200, if we get a 5200 bull cross, if we're above this volume area at 48, and we're not just painting continuous bear divs, you know, then we can start having the more bullish conversation at all-time high retest, which at that point we also have a yearly pivot. But, you know, right now, in the next month or two, I like this zone most definitely. Something else you can always look at as well is just simplify everything. Say, I hate the cloud. I hate anything Josh looks at. Pitchforks are dumb. Let's just look at the 1050 cross. Backtesting on this historically is phenomenal. Does it get noisy? Is it quick sometimes? Sure, but it's usually correct. And right now we have a 1050 cross with MACD being bullish, which is another very profitable signal on backtesting coupled with the 1050 cross. You can see RSI for BTC hasn't quite broken out yet. On ETH it has, which is interesting because it has broken out of its triangle as well on ETH. But the next thing to watch for here is overbought on RSI as this breaks out. And then as it hits 50 to 55, how much of a bear div do we get? You know, do we get this continuous bear div on every single leg up? Or do we get these mini divs where we just kind of ride overbought the entire time? But we're not quite there yet, as you wouldn't expect us to be because we haven't broken out of 45. You know, this can easily just get denied at 45 and then get smacked down back to 42 or something. But there is increasing evidence for positively profitable indicators on backtesting, setting up for bullish activity here. Pitchfork 2-day. Time frame doesn't really matter. We're just picking 3 points here, get a rate of change. We're still well within this mega 2021 range. This crazy to think about that. This is like what, the 30K range, which is larger than most of Bitcoin's history, right? Pre 20K, it's traded in a smaller range than it is now. Just insane to think about. So the Pitchfork is telling you we're running out of road into mid-year, into end of year, especially as far as continuing this expectation of rate of change. So pulling up here isn't out of the question, just as sort of finding resistance and support at these extremes just generally is how this Pitchfork works. If you believe the market believes in it and the rate of change is telling you the midline is expectations as far as should this thing correct itself. And that is essentially an all-time high retest, which isn't exactly surprising considering Q2 seasonality expectations coupled with this yearly pivot at R1, whatever you want to call it. So if we flip bullish in Q2 and stay bullish and maintain bullishness, everyone's going to be watching the top side of that range. And this is going to get absolutely clobbered with bearish short interest, undoubtedly, right? Unless we just bust through it. This thing's going to get demolished at all-time highs. That's my expectation because this range is so well established at this point in time. Let's say you don't like the Pitchfork. We can look at the rainbow chart, which is also telling you this has plenty of upside, right? One thing that I always had trouble with historically is like looking at what is the maximum upside for this cycle, right? In when Bitcoin was 500 or less, my idea of hitting 20K, 18K, that I don't think that was in anybody's mind at that time. But here you can say, well, maximum bubble territory is up 200K plus. Am I saying it's going to get there? No. Am I saying I'll be selling up there? Yeah, that's where I'll be selling for sure. I'd be happy to sell up there based on this chart, right? And we're certainly well within these boundaries, well within means, rate of change, lows, blah, 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 right? Let's say all this fails Q2, low side somewhere around 17 to 20K, something like that. I know this goes between dark mode and bright mode, so sorry about that. 2-year MA multiplier looks fine as well. We kind of scooped the bottom a little bit, just kind of how we scooped at the top. Right now, the top side's at 165. That's going to move up slowly, but it will move up day after day here, so long as price continues to move up. So really the best case always is this slow grind. You want this slow multi-year grind. Eventually it leads to a crescendo euphoric top, but that's always best case scenario. That's sustainable, at least to some degree. Log growth curves, like let's go down the list, right? What's our expectations on these? 165 to 170, no different than the 2-year MA multiplier. This is telling you, yeah, this is fine as far as historical backtesting rate of change. And if we go to just the midpoint midline, that's also, again, all-time high retest, 70K, whatever this is. This isn't exactly telling you anything different that any of these other indicators aren't telling you. 200-week moving average heat map. This is looking at bitcoin.com, by the way. Really great website for all this stuff. 200-week moving average heat map tells you how quickly we are rising on the 200-week moving average. And you can see at all-time high previously, we were not overheated, not as much as we had been previously, where we saw these overbought euphoric type candles, but we were getting there, right? The difference this time is I think we will be less overheated. Again, we want this slow grind. So if this thing takes 2 months to get to 50, perfect. And if it takes another month and a half to get to all-time high retests, perfect. Q3 just is a dumpster fire. We return to 50K, right? Perfect. And then Q4, we retest all-time high again and actually go for it that time. The slower the better. This gives these MAs time to catch up, and it allows us to stray further from the mean historically. So slower is definitely better here. Going into Q4, which is for most people just right. I'm thinking about months in advance. They think about trading STG in the next 5 minutes. They could care less about the next 6 months. Stock to flow, not because I like the price predictions, but days until next halving relatively, we tend to do best when we're just coming out of halving, right? So we're kind of in this not so great zone of prediction for some mega bubble territory, right? Mega bullishness, let's say. So the closer we can get to this, the next halving, obviously the better. It's still a ways away. It's still a long ways away. So I think it's easier to justify a more bullish narrative the closer we get to halving. That being said, inflation's still 2% or less on any given day, 1.8%. So on a relative basis, on a coin basis, there aren't a lot of coins just continually being pumped into the circulation. On the flip side of that, because the price is where it's at, underlying value of those coins is certainly quite high still, right? Multi-millions, I think, at this point in time. Puel multiple also looks fine as far as up's concerned. This is basically how rich are the miners getting? Are the miners being persuaded to sell based on their profits? Now, miners at scale getting 3 to 4 cents per kilowatt hour or lower are just printing money hand over fist here. And they're going to be printing more and more money the higher price goes, so long as they maintain their percentage of hash rate relative to the total network. But again, this is something to look for if we hit that 60 to 70 area. What does this look like at the all-time high retest, right? It probably won't look as overextended as it did previously, and that'll give us more room for additional upside. MVRV is another oscillator to watch historically. It's been really good at picking highs and lows. We didn't quite get to the low, just as we didn't quite get to the high previously. But again, watch this as we are making those highs. So I'm bullish BTC, right? Shocking, right? Hopefully you saw analysis, Twitter, whatever. Hopefully you came to your own conclusions and reached the same conclusion based on that evidence and aren't just like shorting every single candle on the way up here. Not investment advice, do what you want. The more people that short, the better my long position gets, right? Flipping gears to ETH. ETH has a bit of a messier triangular setup, not a distinct horizontal resistance, but just as bullish based on the cloud, based on chart patterns, based on flipping the 200-day moving average, flipping the yearly pivot even. And if you measure out this triangle, maybe you get 4 to 4 or 5, right? Whatever this all-time high retest eventually could be. I think the edge-to-edge move is cleaner here. You're not seeing, a bunch of ledges. So I do like 35 for ETH, I think pretty easily. I don't know how quickly it's going to get there. Something else I didn't mention on BTC is you want increasing volume for sure, especially as we push highs. You don't want to see stagnation or non-exuberance. We need a certain level of bullish volume to get to where I think we're going to get. But all in all, this setup looks great to me as far as edge to edge, pivot, blah, blah, blah. Something else I'm watching just today is on candlesticks. You don't want today's candle to close below yesterday's candle. Otherwise, then you get confirmation of a shooting star, which muddies the waters a little bit on the bullishness. But ultimately, you just don't want to make significant lower lows beyond anything we've currently seen within the breakout of that range. Again, the 1050 crosses, what are you going to deny here? There's a time to be bullish and a time to be bearish. Pick something you like on back testing. I don't care what it is. And what is it telling you? Be honest with yourself here. Here's the RSI breakout I was mentioning on the BTC analysis. This broke out above the 50 for the first time since November. 1050 cross for the first time since December. Bullish MACD. It looks as good as you're going to get, right? As far as entries are concerned in that regard. Now, is this going to retest the 50? Is this going to fail? Is this going to crisscross bearish like it did bullish over here? I don't know, but it's just telling me, hey, it's a great setup to go long. So that's what I did. And ETH's having some other narratives, some interesting narratives. TVL, multi-month high. TVL rising. This is all TVL, by the way, not just ETH. ETH's TVL looking a bit more muted. Not the end of the world. That's more of a DeFi problem than an ETH problem. But ETH has also established this proof of stake narrative coming sooner and sooner and sooner. Now, whether it's going to come this year, next year, or 5 years from now, I don't know. But it may get denied. It may get not denied, but it may get pushed back, let's say. Ultimately, it'll come. And the pumpamentals are significant. I had people messaging me about this who aren't necessarily even understanding what this means. And they're like, this is so bullish. So there must be some like TikTok or YouTuber pushing this narrative on people about the pumpamentals of proof of stake for ETH, because that's certainly a significant driving factor in price here. And if you look at hash rate's still climbing, but I think the smarter miners are beginning to sell their GPUs a little bit. I don't think you're going to see hash rate keep screaming up necessarily. You're probably going to see GPUs on the secondary market for sale more and more. Here's ETC, bit of a creep there. And hash rate along with price, comparing the two directly, it's no comparison still, right? Now, eventually ETH's hash rate's going to go to 0 and ETC's hash rate's going to moon, maybe even match Ethereum's hash rate. But the metrics, the profitability metrics for ETC won't be as rosy as they are for ETH, most likely, even though this mining profitability chart's making me question that thesis. Currently, it's saying ETC is almost as profitable as ETH, which is crazy to think about. But we'll see what this looks like post proof of stake merge, because obviously there will be no mining profitability for ETH, and ETCs just might take over as far as hash rate's concerned, right? Depends on what the miners are thinking. ETH BTC, bit of an Adam and Eve here. It's kind of stalled out. So it'd be interesting to see if BTC moves up first past 45, or if ETH goes to 35 first. I don't know if there's necessarily a trade here, but it certainly doesn't look too bearish. We'll put it like that. You could trade this at 0.073 as a breakout trade, but I just think this chart is a giant mess historically, so I avoid it. DeFi perp doing quite well off of this bull div. DeFi perp is an index that FTX does for DeFi coins based on market cap. So Uniswap's at the top there, and then it's everything else as far as percentages are concerned. But this is also setting up for this edge-to-edge move back to the yearly pivot, back to the middle of the range in the previous year. It certainly does not look like this thing is going to collapse back down to lows just based on technicals. And against BTC, it's still in quite a range as far as DeFi perp is concerned. But hey, this thing could move back to the middle of the range, retest the top of the range. I don't know. But some people would rather trade relative pairs like this than trading the USD pair, which is, whatever you want to trade, right? It doesn't matter to me. And then DeFi against ETH, also at all-time lows-ish and looking good at a reversal setup. Whether or not that'll happen, this is just the 1050 MA again. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know, but maybe it's DeFi's time. Maybe it's DeFi's time to get out of the dumpster at being down 75% plus from all-time highs. We shall see. I certainly wouldn't bet on that, considering the strength of narratives for BTC and ETH right now. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.